Globespan is a Guyanese dialogue moving towards the realization of one nation in one Guyana. It's a platform that offers an all-inclusive discussion with the pros, the cons, the ones that have taken a side, and the ones that stand in the middle. Globespan believes agreeing and disagreeing are part of the nation building. Globespan believes that every Guyanese voice is part of the nation building. As we span the globe for voices from the diaspora and those living home, we stand on our commitment that we are all Guyanese working towards one nation in one Guyana. This land is our land now. As the world turns on its axis, bringing changes, we as Guyanese must adapt to those changes for a better Guyana for all. Globespan stands on its axis with its belief that one nation, one Guyana, one destiny must include voices from all corners of Guyana.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Globespan Television here in New York City. We're broadcasting live. Globespan, as you know, spanned the entire globe with all its news and shows and everything else. Tonight, we have a special guest and a special program. But before we get there, I want to tell you that we must say thanks to Noir Singh for making this program available, and Devin Bissoon and Ryan Gobin are two technical directors. And I want to let all our listeners know that the views expressed tonight are those of our guests and not necessarily staff nor management of Globespan Television. So we have a very interesting show tonight, and we're about to move away from politics for a while and switch to economics, finance, investment, especially in gold, Bitcoin, and so forth, and the rise of oil prices due to the war with Iraq, the US war with Iraq, which has gone global because every country and all the continents are affected by this war right now as we speak because of oil prices. So it's a major shift, and I encourage all of you to listen because it will be a very, very good show. And I hope that we can meet all your needs in investment and so forth. So tonight I have as my guest, and he's my son, Mr. Riel Rose, Chief Market Strategist. And he has been someone who has studied the markets. He has studied Bitcoin, he has studied gold, investments, and banking, and everything else. So he will enlighten us how we can invest and what we should do, and especially most of the underdeveloped countries, how they can make or stabilize the currency. So, Rial, welcome to the program for the second time.
Thank you for having me again, Dr. Rose, my dad. Once again, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here, and I can officially say that now I'm a Guyanese citizen as well.
Okay, great. So tell our listeners what the Chief Market Strategist does at a company.
Okay, so I am the Chief Market Strategist for the Wealth Lab. It's basically an investment education group. We have online presence. We have a WhatsApp group of about 500 folks in there. And what I do as the market strategist is lay out basically the roadmap for how to invest in assets such as Bitcoin and potentially gold as well. But my main focus is Bitcoin and crypto, and secondarily other commodities such as gold, and thirdly, I could say stock market.
Explain what is cryptocurrency to our listeners, because most of them don't know, and as well Bitcoin. I know they know of gold and so forth, but explain what is cryptocurrency.
So cryptocurrency, and that's a very good question. Cryptocurrency is a digital currency that a person can exchange from one person to another. You can't really hold or touch it, but it's a digital asset. So basically it works on a ledger and it's recorded on a blockchain. So for instance, if you have a phone with an app on it where we can download, for instance, a hot wallet, and the hot wallet is used to store digital assets, I can transfer that peer to peer from me to you to anyone in the country or in the world without a third party, meaning without a bank or a financial institution such as Western Union. That's it in a nutshell.
Is there transfer cost to the
Yes, there's
person
going to be
transferring it to?
Yes, there's going to be network fees, and it depends on the cryptocurrency you use. However, with a cryptocurrency like Solana, the fees could be up to 3 cents.
Okay. Okay, good. I hope our listeners are having enjoying this program so far. Now, Bitcoin, you're a specialist on Bitcoin. Bitcoin has fallen, and so is gold, and the stock market in general since the war actually started. Is now the time to purchase Bitcoin and gold? As a matter of fact, gold has dropped almost $1,000 from last week within the last 7 days, from $5,500 an ounce to about $4,400 an ounce today. So is it a good strategy now to buy gold and hold it, or to buy Bitcoin and hold it, invest in Bitcoin as well?
Well, I can start off by saying that in regards to gold, it's never a bad time to buy gold and hold it. However, what you want to do with gold is try to buy gold from my perspective. And what I do is try to buy it at the moving averages. So when you look at a chart, so whether it's at the 50-week moving average or the 200-week moving average, that's where you want to locate. So I expect gold to drop potentially down to $3,500 US an ounce. I don't know when it's going to happen, but I can see that happening, within a period of time, within either this quarter or next quarter, because gold has flipped bearish. And this is going to be more of chart talk, but it's flipped bearish on the weekly chart. So we'll see how it goes. Now it's down $1,000. I would nibble in and buy a little bit of gold at this price, but I do think that gold's going to see more downside in the days ahead, especially with the fact that there's wars going on. And with this war going on, you're having increased inflation, increased oil costs. And part of the reason, the narrative behind why gold dumped is due to the fact that many experts explain that people who were buying gold recently, when it was on its bull run, were people who were new to gold, right? They're not the OG gold holders. So those are going to be the first people to panic and sell gold. So what you want to see is a washout of all the weak hands, and we're seeing that take place right now. And that's why gold has dumped about $1,000. And once the market stabilizes, then it'd be a good idea to get back into gold. But I do expect gold to be about $10,000, probably by 2030.
Well, some experts disagree with you. They're saying that, and I read this just today, that gold will not go below $4,000 an ounce, even though with the war. And they're expecting another 15 to 20 months, gold will rise to about $10,000 an ounce when it starts to climb again. What have you to say to these experts?
I mean, there's different opinions, right? When it comes to reading charts and doing chart analysis, technical analysis, it's subjective. So some people might see 4,000, I see 3,500. That's a gap of about $500. That makes a difference. However, over the long term, whether you buy it at $4,000 or 3,500, it doesn't make a difference when when gold's going to be about $10,000, whether it's $10,000 in 15 months or 10,000 by 2030, you're in a good position because you're beating inflation.
Tell me, how does gold beat inflation?
Because it outperforms the inflation of the dollar, for instance. So the dollar, the US dollar, or even the Guyanese dollar loses its value, its purchasing power year over year. So the US dollar is losing on average about 8 to 10% of its purchasing power. So, and gold, since gold is priced in gold, the same way Bitcoin is priced in Bitcoin, and there's a limited supply of gold as well as Bitcoin, then what you have is more value because it's more scarce. Whereas US dollars are printed and borrowed at large amounts in the trillions of dollars, which leads to basically debasement of the currency.
Bitcoin, as of last December, was 126,000. Now it's dropped to about $73,000. But Bitcoin, as I understand it, operates on a 4-year cycle. I don't know if you agree with me on that, but explain what's this big drop in Bitcoin and how low you expect Bitcoin to go before it starts to rise again.
Okay, well, that question is right up my alley. And I've been dealing with Bitcoin now for over 7 years. So that's a great question. Now, what happens, and it's true, I am a guy who believes in the 4-year cycle. I'm not a super cycle guy because every 4 years, the super cyclers come out and they're like, Bitcoin is going to go to $250,000, Bitcoin to $1 million. And they're pumping this and they're telling folks to get in. And a lot of times people get wrecked because they're saying that the 4-year cycle is not in play. However, I'm going to provide some evidence that the 4-year cycle is in play. So from the start, when Bitcoin started in 2009, you had the first halving in 2012, right? The year after the halving is when Bitcoin traditionally hits its all-time high. So it hit its all-time high in the fourth quarter of 2013. Now, if you fast forward 4 years, Bitcoin hit its all-time high once again at 2017 in the fourth quarter. And then you fast forward to 2021, 4 years later, it hit its all-time high in the fourth quarter again, and the same thing in 2025. So you see a 4-year cycle of highs, 2013, then you see 2017, 2021, and the most recent 2025 at 126,000, like you pointed out. Now, that also follows the lows. So usually Bitcoin will, on average, hit its bottom about 383 days after it hits its all-time high. So the key here is to watch the Bitcoin halving. What is the Bitcoin halving? The Bitcoin halving is where every 4 years, 2012, 2016, 2020, and 2024, the amount of Bitcoin that is mined, you know how you mine gold and you find gold? The same way with Bitcoin is just done digitally with computers. The amount is cut in half every 4 years, right? And then the year after that, about 530 days on average, Bitcoin tends to hit its all-time high. So when you look at the lows now, you have it occurring 383 days after it hits its all-time high. So on average, you would say that Bitcoin would hit its low around the fourth quarter, and it did that in 2014, 2018, 2022, and now it's left to be seen if it's going to follow the cycle in 2026. Now, if things are projected to work the way it did in the past years, or it's following past cycles, well, then Bitcoin is most likely going to basically hit its bottom in the fourth quarter of 2026. And that is the time when you want to go in. And I did this in 2022. In 2022, when it hit its bottom with the FTX scandal, it hit its bottom at 16,000. It was like 15,700 in November of 2022. So that is the time when you start to back up the truck, sell whatever you got, and buy some Bitcoin and hold it for the next 2 years. So you would say 2026, you would hold it for the next 2 to 3 years, actually, because the next peak will most likely happen in 2029, right? After the halving in 2028. So hopefully we don't complicate this too much, but the keys that you want to look for are the highs and the lows. Does that make sense?
Yeah, but this time here, it's about 73,000 trading today.
Right.
Sorry. How low you expect Bitcoin to go now?
So, yeah, that's a good question as well. So in regards to that, you would look at the moving averages again. So Bitcoin right now is exactly 6 months, about 6 months after it hit its all-time high. So you have about probably another 6 months before it bottoms out. So currently it's at its midpoint, right? So you want to look at the 200 SMA, which is the moving average. And the 200 SMA currently is sitting at around $58,000. So the way I approach this is by dollar cost averaging in with a position size. So I would allocate about 1% of my capital to buying Bitcoin at 58,000 because that would be the range, right now at the 200-week SMA. Then you have the 300-week SMA. If it dips down to the 300-week SMA, which is between 43,000 to 48,000, that range, then I would increase my purchases to probably 5 to 10% and do that by dollar cost averaging. What is dollar cost averaging? It's buying crypto either daily, weekly, bi-weekly, or on a monthly basis with a certain allocated amount. So let's say you want to buy $100 worth, then you would fix your schedule to buy $100 worth either every day, every week, every 2 weeks, or every month, or every quarter, however you want to establish that. Now, that's for the moving averages. On average, though, you have to consider that Bitcoin usually has a drawdown from its all-time high to its low about 75%. So it has a 75% drawdown, and it did that in 2022, right? In 2014 and 2018, it had an 85% drawdown. So this is moving beyond the moving averages. So if you have a drawdown of 75% from 126,000, that would put you to about $31,000. So at 31,000, if Bitcoin drops down to $31,000, I'm backing up the truck and buying as much Bitcoin as I possibly can. Now, if it draws down to 85%, that would bring us down to about 18,900. Well, then I would consider convincing my wife to sell our home to buy some Bitcoin because that will appreciate faster the way the governments are printing money and you have currency debasement than actually holding real estate from my perspectives. So just to summarize that and recap that for you, anywhere between 58,000 to 18,000 is the buy zone. That's where I would strike and buy. And you just have to figure out how much you would be allocating. If it hits the 18,000, I'm buying as much as possible. 31,000, I'm buying as much as possible. If it hovers around 58, then I will dollar cost average and buys, on a weekly basis or bi-weekly basis. So that's the range. I hope that helps clarify it for you.
Okay. Now, how can the average person purchase Bitcoin?
You can purchase it through an exchange, and there's many exchanges that you have access to in Guyana. For instance, Binance is one of them. OKX is another one. So you can buy them through an exchange. You'd probably have to connect, it through a credit card or a bank account to actually transfer that money to the exchange and then acquire Bitcoin.
Okay. And again, I was reading up on this today. And here I'm seeing some financial experts, I would say, believe that Bitcoin has fallen because of the war. But others have said because of other external circumstances. And as you said, it operates in a 4-year cycle. So which is which here? Is because of the war or the 4-year cycle?
Right. So again, I'm a believer in the 4-year cycle. There's others who believe in the super cycle and others believe in narratives. I don't fall for the narratives. I think that price dictates the narrative. So to answer your question, I believe that Bitcoin's price is not impacted by the war. It's doing what it's going to do regardless of war or hurricanes, natural catastrophes, whatever it may be. It's going to do what it has been doing for the past 3 cycles.
What's SMA? You mentioned that before. Explain to our listeners.
Simple moving average. So it's a collection of moving averages of where price was, and then they calculate that at the 200-day, and they would be aligned. So you have the 200-day, you have the 50, the 20, the 50, the 100, the 200, and the 300 moving averages of where prices are, and they move up and down depending on where price is. So let's say, for instance, Bitcoin is at 126,000, then all the moving averages would be moving up towards that price, right? So you'd have the 20 that would be the closest to the 126, then you'd have the 50, then you would have the 100, then you'd have the 200, and then the 300.
Folks, we're talking about Bitcoin because a number of people, I know friends as well, have become very, very wealthy because of their investment in Bitcoin. They invested at a time when it was low and they sold when it was high and have made millions of dollars. So everybody can make at least a good sum of money of Bitcoin if you follow instructions when to invest and when to sell. So it is as clear as that, I will tell you. Now, Bitcoin came on the market and it became like a hot commodity. Is Bitcoin going to become a global currency replacing the US dollar?
Not anytime soon. I think what you're going to see is that Bitcoin is now used as a strategic asset for nation states. They're holding it as a strategic reserve asset, like similar to gold. And for individuals like ourselves, we hold it basically as an inflation hedge, a store of value. But you have to hold it over long periods of time. So the minimum amount of time I would say was be to hold some Bitcoin and you'd be in the market is 4 years to see that work in your favor.
Okay, good. Now, if you're to advise your clients whether to purchase Bitcoin or gold, what advice, what preference you'll give to them?
I would say a combination of both. You want to hedge your bets, right? So gold, you can't go wrong with gold. Gold holds its time. It's been around for over 5,000 years. Many different civilizations have traded and used gold. So gold's going to be there. However, gold's not going to get you rich. Gold's going to help you maintain your wealth if you have and help you beat inflation. Bitcoin is what can basically be a life changer for you if you get in at the right time and sell some at the right time. So you want to get in at the lows and get out at the highs, right? But you don't want to sell all of your Bitcoin. You want to sell a certain allocation of it. So I think that Bitcoin is the fastest horse. Why? Because it's a newer asset. It's much smaller than gold. What gold is now probably about a $30 trillion market cap, whereas Bitcoin is a 1.3 trillion market cap. So there's a lot of upside for Bitcoin over the next 10, 15, 20 years if things continue to play out. So the key to Bitcoin is that as long as governments are going to be printing money, and as long as there's going to be inflationary inputs and debasement of currency, then all assets, Bitcoin, real estate, gold, stocks will all rise in value.
Now, you mentioned Bitcoin could drop as low as 18,000 or 31,000 or 58,000. If Bitcoin should drop at about 18,000, what advice you will give to your clients, like how much money they should invest in Bitcoin, what percentage of their salary they should invest in Bitcoin at 18,000, at 31,000, and at 58,000?
So at 58,000, I would be, and I could talk about what I'm going to do because this is not financial advice. I would be allocating 1% of my capital, right? Every week. That's what I would do at 58,000 and continue accumulating at that amount, at that pace. If Bitcoin drops down to 40 in the 40,000s, I would increase that to 5%. If it drops down to 31,000, then I would increase that to 50% of my capital. And if it drops down to 18%, then I would probably back up the truck and probably put in 90% of my capital and hold 10% in cash. Why? Because Bitcoin has proven from 2012, 2016, 2020 and 2025 or 2024 into this last bull market where we saw the top that it comes back and it works on this cycle, which is beautiful. It's almost like it's mother nature almost. It's like connected to nature. It's an interesting phenomenon. Whoever created Bitcoin, they say it's Satoshi Nakamoto, whatever they did and the ideas that they have was pretty much genius, that they were able to align it with the election cycles, the US election cycles. So if you notice that whenever there's a US election, Bitcoin rises in prices most of the time. And then Bitcoin goes into a bear market during the US midterm, which is 2014, 2018, 2022, and now 2026. We'll see how it plays out this year, but that's the way it usually plays out. To simplify it, always think like that. Bitcoin starts pumping during presidential election years and then goes into a bear market and dumping right before the midterm elections, a year before the midterm elections. And then during the midterm elections is when it bottoms out.
Does gold operate on a cycle too?
It does, but gold is much older. So, the last time I remember gold pumping like this was probably 2021, 2022, 2020, 2021. And then before that was probably 10 years before that during the last financial crisis in 2008. So it works a little bit different. Gold's a little bit more tricky. I'm not the best at TA when it comes to gold. I'm not a gold expert, like you guys know. I'm a strategically a Bitcoin guy, but gold, I know a little bit about gold, and I know that gold does not work 100% on a 4-year cycle. It works a little bit differently. You got to look at, gold can sit and not move for decades at a time. However, the interesting thing about gold is that even if it doesn't move up in price, it's still holding its value because of the debasement of all fiat currencies. And I don't know if your viewers are familiar with fiat currencies, and fiat currencies is just paper money, whether it's Guyanese dollars, US dollars, it's backed by the government. Fiat means by government decree, meaning the government says it's good, so it's good, whether it's backed by gold or nothing.
A number of countries in, well, I call them global south, but underdeveloped countries actually are third world countries. They now today the new international relations term is global south, the poor countries, the global north are the rich countries. A number of them are trying to purchase gold and hoard it for a long-term basis. Now, would you advise countries to hoard gold or, as well as Bitcoin, or just gold alone?
Both. I think holding gold provides them with a hedge, right? So if Bitcoin is down in price and gold is up, you have a hedge. And if Bitcoin is up and gold is not doing anything, you're still making money, right? So I think that they should hold both. It's imperative that a nation like Guyana and the rest of the Caribbean nations hold gold as a reserve. As you can see, the US dollar is under attack, right? You can see it from the Chinese who are trying to internationalize the RMB or the renminbi or what they call the yuan. They're trying to internationalize that. And we see now currently, in which we'll probably get into a little bit more, is the current war on Iran. The Iranians are saying, hey, if you want to get your ship out of the Strait of Hormuz, you have to pay us in Chinese currency. So you're seeing this attack. So as the US uses sanctions and abuses the exorbitant privilege they have as the US dollar being the world's reserve currency, people are turning away and looking for alternatives. So it's imperative for yourself, me as an individual who earns in US dollars, to have some kind of hedge because since the 1950s, I would just say since 1971, when Richard Nixon depegged the dollar from gold, the dollar has lost over 90% of its value and continues to lose value on a regular basis every single day. And that's going to continue happening. So if you don't ask for a raise of more than 8 to 10% from your boss, you're losing money on a yearly basis. That's the key. So I think governments should definitely hold gold and start thinking strategically about holding Bitcoin, because I think that what's going to happen over the next 50 years, and I'm speculating, is that gold is going to become a more major player as a currency, or at least a reserve asset. Many central banks are going to go back to holding gold and potentially pegging their currency to gold, or at least having gold there that they can use as a hedge, right? So, but what's going to happen is that most likely, and many people will disagree with me, is that gold lacks transparency. You have to trust in a third party to either hold your gold or for that third party to tell you, hey, this is an accurate amount of gold that we're actually holding, mining, etc. So there's a lack of transparency with gold, and I think that that's part of the reason why gold, and many people disagree, failed in the 1970s. And that's why the US depegged from it, and other countries started, like France, started asking to repatriate their gold from the US. So it's possible that we return to a gold standard within the next decade or two as the United States, or even maybe longer, the United States the dollar continues to lose its status as the world's reserve currency. However, I do think over the long haul, gold will fail, and that will might leave us with Bitcoin as a digital asset that's transparent. You can see the transactions on the ledger. It's a blockchain ledger. It's like a receipt that you would get from a store. Well, this is a global ledger that the whole world can see. Obviously, it's encrypted, so you won't know who's the individual. You're synonymous. You're not totally, autonomous, but you're synonymous. And from that perspective, I think that gold again will most likely be the monetary or the reserve asset of the world, and Bitcoin maybe 50, 100 years from now could possibly be. And this is all speculation.
You said that the ships passing through the Strait of Hormuz, the Iranians are demanding that it be paid in the Chinese currency, the yuan, and not the US dollar like most other countries. Why is that? When the US dollar is the most common currency around the world or throughout the world. Why Iran is asking for the Chinese currency, the yuan?
Well, one is to stick it to the Americans. Two, the Americans have put sanctions on the Iranians going back to what, 1979 with the rise of the Ayatollah. So you have an issue where the Iranians have a hard time accessing US dollars, and there's a lot of restrictions on them. For instance, there was currently an attack on the Iranian currency, which I believe that Scott Bessent, our Treasury Secretary of the United States, coordinated that attack, and which led to massive protests recently. I'm sure you've all heard about it in the news, where people were protesting all over Iran, of which the US government and the Israelis believed that that was going to be the ripe opportunity for them to have regime change. But as we can see, that has not come to fruition yet. So in that regard, that's why I think the Iranians are using the yuan, the Chinese yuan versus the US dollar. And also because the Iranians purchase their items, a lot of items from the Chinese, right? So if they're purchasing items from the Chinese, it would only make sense that they use the Chinese yuan versus the dollar, because they can't use dollars to buy anything. Or it's difficult
Should
for them
other
to use
countries
dollars to
follow?
buy stuff.
Should other countries follow Iran in having the yuan as the currency as well, alongside the US dollar?
It's always good to diversify. It doesn't hurt. I mean, especially if you're a country that's doing a lot of trade with China, it doesn't hurt to hold some yuan, so you can make purchases and you don't have to use the US dollar to do so. So it doesn't hurt to diversify. As the world is changing and we're moving towards a multipolar world, even though the United States is trying to stop that and they're trying to maintain a unipolar world by cornering the energy market, that you can't stop that change. And I think that change is going to happen regardless. So again, I think that countries should diversify. They shouldn't only hold US dollars. They should hold some different currencies, whether it's the euro, the yuan, and then hold some strategic reserves, gold and Bitcoin, silver if you must.
Well, the British have maintained their currency, the pound, and they're not diversifying from that at all, because the pound is actually, as you know, is a solid currency. So most of the countries within Africa and the Commonwealth and the Caribbean were formerly British colonies. Do you think they should follow in the British footsteps and have the pound as well?
Well, the British, they're actually right now they are the second largest purchasers of U.S. Treasuries. So they're putting
Right.
all their eggs in the U.S. basket. And I don't think that's a smart move in this current world. Not that I'm against the US dollar. I have no problem with the US dollar. It's just that the way the world is moving right now, it would make sense to diversify and not follow the British.
Okay. Let's turn to we'll come back to investment again. But let's turn to the war for a brief moment here. The war, the United States declare, well, the United States and Israel declare war on or attack Iran, and Iran is fighting back. What are the main reasons? The Israelis have been saying that Iran is very close to having a nuclear weapon, and the United States must act now. But last year, the United States attacked Iran and said that it got rid of all its nuclear weaponry and so forth. So you have been reading up on the war a lot. What are your views?
Oh, this is a big question. Okay, well, where do I start? So I am not a geopolitical strategist or analyst. Neither I'm a little bit more of a macroeconomic guy, but I do understand geopolitics. So I will try to break down the best I can from the geopolitical angle and then the macroeconomic angle with the monetary. Now, from my perspective, this war has to do more with cornering resources than actually Iran having or possessing or having the opportunity to create a nuclear weapon. Um, you had UN inspectors over the past decade have been in and out of Iran, and they basically saying that the Iranians have not been developing a nuclear weapon. Furthermore, you had the former Ayatollah Khomeini basically issuing a fatwa, meaning that's like a law, stating that the Iranians are not going to develop a nuclear weapons. He forbade that from happening. So what you have here from the geopolitical perspective is the United States trying to create chokeholds, right? They want to have strategic dominance over the Middle East and the rest of the globe in order to squeeze the Chinese because they believe that the Chinese are their main rival, right? And there's a lot of people who are going to get into all sorts of theories. You have Professor Jeffrey Sachs, for instance, from Columbia University, who says, well, it's the Israelis and they're the ones dictating policy to the United States. I, for one, don't believe that. I believe that Uncle Sam has been on this path going back to the days of, when they were conquering the natives in the United States in the plains of the Midwest, right? So, and then you had actions in Haiti in 1820. You had actions all across the Caribbean. And for instance, you mentioned to me that I remember growing up, you always talked about the Monroe Doctrine and gunboat diplomacy. So you had, for instance, what the United States is doing is not new. They did this in Hawaii and took over Hawaii. They defeated the Spanish in the Philippines and took over the Philippines. So this process of total domination or imperial colonial domination is not nothing new. So in regards to Iran, Iran was is like the final piece in the Middle East. If they can knock off Iran, then they have total control of all the oil resources in that region, and they have total control of what is being moved through the Navy out of that region. And that way they can keep the US dollar, as the preeminent currency due to the fact that oil now, all the oil is going to be, as it is now, is going to continue being traded and priced in US dollars. And that's going to put China at a disadvantage, right? And that's the way they want to squeeze. So that way they can control the flow of oil and how much oil goes to the Chinese. Hence, they invaded Venezuela right next door to Guyana and took Maduro out. They kidnapped him, brought him to New York, put him in central booking in Brooklyn, and now he's standing trial, right? And what did they do with that? They basically cut off the Chinese from accessing cheap crude from Venezuela. It also impacted severely the Cubans. Cubans are having rolling blackouts as we speak right now. Why? Because they can't get any oil or gas from Venezuela, who was one of the primary supporters, Mexico, or anyone else. The Russians will try to send some tankers. We'll see how that plays out, right? So from that perspective, uh, if you look at what the Americans have done with this war, a lot of people, you're seeing all the headlines. The Americans are losing, they're getting destroyed, they're losing aircraft carriers, they're losing planes, etc. And all their bases have been bombed by the Iranians. But in fact, this is working in the favor of the empire. How is it working in the favor of the empire? Well, its competitors. The largest competitors to the United States oil, because the United States now is the largest exporter of oil. They have energy independence. I remember that occurring during the early 2000s, is the Middle East. So if the Middle East is knocked off, right? Saudi, UAE, Qatar, Iran, Bahrain, they're no longer competition for the Americans. And the same thing for natural gas, LNG. They're one of the main competitors are the Russians. The Russians are benefiting from this because the sanctions have been removed and now they can sell gas and oil at much higher prices because I think oil is what, $90 a barrel, $100 a barrel. So from that perspective, the United States is winning. And if you look at the Strait of Hormuz, for instance, I believe, and there's an argument made by Dr. Anas Al-Jahi, and he basically argues that the Strait of Hormuz is closed not by the Iranians, but de facto by the Americans, because all the ships that are there, they lost their insurance premiums. No one wants to insure their ship. So the United States comes in, puts out a $20 billion insurance package. So whose insurance are they buying now, these shippers? They're buying American insurance, right? So that works in the favor of the Americans because they're making money. They're using LNG as like a political weapon, right? So if you look at the global dominance, this puts the United States in a position where they'll continue to dominate for the next generation or two in regards to a stranglehold and cornering the resources of oil and gold. Oh, oil and sorry, and gas, energy, basically, in other words. Does that summarize that for you?
Yeah. Folks, don't
Actually,
shift your
before,
dial.
okay, go ahead.
Stay tuned to Globespan. I'll go to commercial break right now, and we must ask you to support our sponsors. Buy from one.com. That's one, the number one.com. Curry Roti Box and Travel Span. Those are three of our main sponsors. Buyfromone.com. They ship Guyanese food and groceries to all US states, even as far as California. You can buy your 7 curries, your duck curry, roti, Guyanese bread, meat, and groceries, and much, much more. And you can also buy from one.com. They accept EBT, SNAP, and all of the credit cards and debit cards. And they ship directly to your homes in all 50 states in the United States. Now, you can also place your order by phone, 718-551-3292. That's 718-551-3292. As I said, we use all credit cards, EBT cards, SNAP, and all the rest of the cards. Your duck curry, your 7 curries, your duck curry, your roti, your Guyanese bread, meat, groceries, and much, much more. Just go to buyfromone.com website, and there you can see everything and place your order. And you'll have no regrets. You'll have the best West Indian or Caribbean food ever. Now, Travel Span, that's my favorite. They've been in business for over 30 years, and they have spanned the globe when it comes to traveling. They will take you any place in this world. Now, because the staff have the experience to do so. They have upcoming tours to Dubai. Well, now those tours maybe have been suspended because of the war. India, South Africa, Norway, etc. And they're located on Liberty Avenue, 108.09. The number to call is 718-845-0437. Travel Span, as I said, 30 plus years of experience. And they can book your hotels, make your traveling so comfortable and easy. You'll have no regrets whatsoever if you just call Travel Span. Again, at 718-845-0437 in New York. In Georgetown, Guyana, 227-1701. Rosalton on the quarantine, 337-4287. And Shaguna in Trinidad and Tobago, or in Trinidad, 665-3383. And in Valpark, 645-1604. So again, call Travel Span for all your traveling needs, your hotel accommodation, and for everything. Again, I will repeat, 30 plus years in experience. And they have spanned the entire globe when it comes to traveling. Any part of the world they can take you. So make it easy on yourself. Don't go through the headaches of calling an airline or calling someone to book your trip for you. Travel Span will do it very, very quickly for you. Thanks. Now, coming back to the program, Iran, as we all know, has attacked its neighboring states or countries. Qatar, Iran, Iraq rather, United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, Dubai, Saudi Arabia, etc., etc. Is this the right strategy for Iran, or Iran could isolate itself? Because most of these countries have recalled their ambassadors and have suspended the Iranian ambassadors from their countries. So Iran could find itself alone in the Middle East without any friends. Let me hear your views on that.
I already think that Iran is alone in the Middle East, but they do have friends in Iraq, and they have friends in Lebanon, Hezbollah, and then they have the Shiites in Iraq. So they still have friends in the region, and they will continue to have friends in the region. However, they're going to be isolated from the West, which they already are, and to a lesser extent from the other Sunni Arab nations, the Gulf nations. So it's a difficult situation, but I understand the position that the Iranians are taking. If I was being attacked and my next door neighbor is helping a foreign entity attack me, I'm most likely going to have to deal with my next door neighbor. So that only makes sense. However, what I'd like to say is that Guyana, for instance, is one of the winners. Besides the United States, because we mentioned before I was mentioning how the United States is taking advantage of this by cornering the market, and now the rest of the world has to rely on US oil and gas, the Europeans, because under President Biden, the pipeline was blown up between Germany and the United States. I mean, so between Germany and Russia. So the Europeans no longer have access to cheap Russian gas like they used to. They do have access, but it's to a lesser extent. So they have to rely on US LNG, which is far more expensive. And this is where Guyana becomes a winner too, because now the rest of the world are going to be calling up the Guyanese to be like, hey, can I get some crude from you? Right? Because the Middle East has been basically tapped out. They're out of commission. So Guyana could benefit from that. Also, the dollar, the price of oil per barrel has gone up. Now they projected that it was going to be $59 a barrel for 2026 budget, but now it's up to $100 a barrel. So Guyana is going to have a windfall of cash, which is going to put themselves in a really good position. And Dr. Ali, President Ali, also proposed recently that Guyana become a strategic oil hub, where it would be a place where you would hold oil and send oil and ship oil out to the rest of the world. It would be great if Guyana would build their own refinery, because now they can send out a finished product. So they should think about that as well. But so Guyana, this war puts Guyana in a really good position because of all the demand that's going to come from it, and all the refineries across the world who don't have access to oil are going to be calling Guyana for some. And I'm sure they already are and have been calling Guyana for oil. So that's one of the winners. The losers out of this are going to be the Middle Eastern countries, because they're not going to have as much revenue, right? Dubai, I mean, UAE, Qatar, Iran, all the Gulf countries, plus Iran, Iraq. The EU is going to be losers because they have to buy expensive oil and gas from the United States, Guyana, and from the rest of the world, wherever else they can get it. The Asians are the big losers. China, to a certain extent, even though they're holding a lot of reserves. But even the bigger losers are South Korea and Japan. They're heavily dependent. I'm even hearing news reports that Thailand is about to run out of oil, or Vietnam's about to run out of oil anytime soon. So Asia is really in a bad predicament. So if Guyana can strategically position itself, they can now have new customers, Asian customers. Asia has what, 5 billion people? That's a huge market that Guyana can tap and take advantage of and have Asian investment coming in to Guyana.
What about Venezuela? They could make some strides in this as well.
Well, Venezuela's oil is going to be controlled by the United States. So they're in a tough position with Venezuela. I'm not an expert on Venezuela, so I don't want to pontificate too much on Venezuelan situation. But I do know that it's going to be a benefit for Guyana and any other oil producing countries.
So with the Middle East oil refineries being bombed by Iran, Guyana could emerge as one of the leading oil producers in the world.
If they get their own refineries, yes. Otherwise, they're just going to be exporting the raw crude, right? And they're not going to be able to benefit as much. They're going to have a benefit, but they can even benefit even more. For instance, look at Nigeria. The richest man in Nigeria, Dangote, Mr. Dangote built a refinery in Nigeria. That refinery is getting calls from all across Africa. People across Africa and Asia are calling up the Nigerians and saying, hey, can you send me some refined oil ASAP, right? So if Guyana starts moving in strategically and building refineries, then what does that do for them? It secures energy dominance, not yeah, in a way, some dominance for themselves, but it secures themselves, it puts themselves, it's energy security, I should say, right? Because now they can secure their energy by accessing it and then refining it themselves and then selling it to their own people. So they're not going to be dependent on a third party because currently Guyana is still importing oil from what I understand from other countries of the
Yeah,
world.
the refined oil because Guyana don't have an oil refinery, so they
Right.
have to import oil.
Yeah, so if they move in that direction, they're getting windfalls from the oil revenues that they're getting. So if they take some of that oil revenue now and have a private public partnership, right? Have the development of a refinery in Guyana, that will go a long way.
So, what advice you have to give to the Guyana government?
I just did. Build a refinery.
That
Save your gold. Mine your own gold. Basically, refine your own gold. Domesticate everything because that's what the United States is doing. This war is putting the United States in a position where now it can bring manufacturing back home. Well, this puts Guyana in a position where they can start developing their own manufacturing and their own refineries, basically to refine oil and gas, like I mentioned before, as well as gold. So Guyana should be stacking up on some gold and holding it as a reserve treasury, a reserve asset, Bitcoin, and start basically adding oil to their reserves because this war has proven that you need to hold oil as well, right? Because if you have reserves of oil, you're not going to feel the impact of the price increases and you're not going to be at the whim of another country.
now, I have a tough question for you here. This guy, Satoshi Nakamoto, you know who is he?
Nobody knows who he is.
He invented Bitcoin and he
Yes.
disappeared after. So
It's like an immaculate conception.
so nobody knows where he is, but Bitcoin is there flourishing. They said somewhere down the road he's behind the scenes and doing his stuff. But my question to you is this: the same way he invented Bitcoins or Bitcoin, some other person could invent another currency or another currency could emerge just like Bitcoin. Do you think that's possible?
Yes, there's There's over what 30 million cryptocurrencies right now, right? But none of them hold the value or have a strategic importance of Bitcoin because one, not all of them have the same amount of scarcity as Bitcoin, right? The supply, the stock and supply is only 21 million Bitcoins. It's ever going to be mined between now and the year 2140, right? So we're all going to be passed. Our grandchildren are going to be passed. Well, our children are going to be passed. But that is what differentiates Bitcoin. And Bitcoin started organically and naturally. Bitcoin has no CEO, has no headquarters. It's kind of like gold. You go to gold, there's no CEO for gold. You got to go and find the gold mine and put money into getting electricity or power to the gold mine to mine the gold. With Bitcoin, you got to have a lot of energy and you have to have compute power, a lot of computers to power to basically solve the encrypted the algorithm or the I'm sorry, forgive me on that one. You have to solve the puzzle, which is it's a puzzle that they have created. And once you solve that puzzle, then you get rewarded for mining that Bitcoin and adding it to the blockchain. So the miners, that's the role of the miners. They basically have to figure out a puzzle through computation, really hard puzzles to do, and then they record the transactions that people make onto the ledger, and that's how they get paid. So with that system, it's very hard to replicate that. And the way Bitcoin came into existence, where you have an individual who's no longer there, that means it's the community now that runs Bitcoin and not a CEO. So for instance, if the government comes along and wants to arrest the CEO of Bitcoin, there's no one to be found. Whereas all the other cryptocurrencies, you can do that with. The same thing with gold. Who are you going to arrest for gold? You can't because gold is found all over the world. There's not just one person controlling gold. There's no CEO with no headquarters. So the likelihood of another cryptocurrency being created in that fashion and be birthed with such an immaculate conception is highly unlikely to occur.
Well, it said that Satoshi Nakamoto, his life was threatened, his family life was threatened because when he invented Bitcoin, it was like a challenge to the rest of the currency, especially US dollar. He disappeared and his family disappeared with him. One report says that he was found in Tahiti on a yacht. But by the time any reporters to get there, the yacht disappeared and sailed to some other part of the world. Nobody knows. But why would he disappear? And if he disappears, why Bitcoin is flourishing so well? What's the reason? There's nothing. He's not behind it, or he's behind it, what, on the phone?
Oh, okay. Because as I just explained, Bitcoin, what he did was he handed it off to a community of people, right?
Okay,
And
okay.
so now you have miners, people who mine just the same way you have gold miners in Guyana, in
Right, right, right,
Venezuela,
right.
and different countries across the world. It's the same thing with Bitcoin. You have miners in Canada, United States, and Guyana should be a place where they should be mining gold too, because you have excess, probably flaring that occurs where you have to burn off extra reserves of gas and oil. Instead of doing that, you can use that extra that you're going to be burning off to mine Bitcoin so you don't pollute the environment and kill all the fish in the neighborhood, right? So that way, Guyana can now gain access and start building a strategic reserve by mining Bitcoin. So they don't have to spend billions of dollars in purchasing it. So that's the main primary reason why Bitcoin is still going, because it's community based. It's a community. There's miners across the world that basically mine this coin on a daily basis.
Folks, you have been listening to Globespan Television here with the expert on Bitcoin, and I hope you all invest in Bitcoin because you can become wealthy if you invest in Bitcoin more than invest in gold or any other currency. Bitcoin, you buy it at its lows and you sell it when it's high, and you'll make a ton of money. Believe me on this one. So I hope you listeners, you learned something tonight, and don't be scared. Just track Bitcoin as it goes along. It's at $72,000 as of today. And as Rial said, my son said it could drop to 58,000 to 31,000 to 18,000. We don't know what the bottom line it is, but just monitor it. And if it continues to drop, you buy when it's low and you sell when it's high. And believe me, you'll make a ton of money. I've got friends who became multimillionaires because of buying Bitcoins at the low and selling when it was high.
If I may real quick, just pay attention to the next 6 months. Bitcoin should bottom out in the fourth quarter between late October to early November. That's when I'm going to start accumulating. And hopefully, Dad, I can be back on your show sometime around late October, early November, the fourth quarter, to encourage folks to get in at that time if things play out. Now, if things change, because nothing is guaranteed, if things change, then I'll be on that show to let you guys know, hey, things have changed and the cycle is broken. So, but for now, keep your eye on fourth quarter, late October, early November for Bitcoin to bottom out approximately 383 days from October 6th, 2025. That was the all-time high. Keep that in mind, folks.
So, folks, you heard that. Watch out for Bitcoin by late October, early November. It should bottom out then, and that's the time you should buy, and buy in large quantities. That when it rises again, when you sell, you don't have to work again. You can take your pension and just relax. Okay. So, Rial, we have come to the end of the program. Any closing remarks from you?
Yeah, thank you for having me on the show once again. I would say to all the viewers, thank you for listening in. You can find me on Substack at Real Rose at Substack. I'm about to launch my own YouTube channel. You'll be able to find it at my namesake, Real Rose at YouTube, as well as my website, which is wealthlab.club. You can join there. And I also have a WhatsApp group, and we can share that group. What I do in the WhatsApp group is I provide day-to-day analysis of Bitcoin and other cryptos. I have about 450 people in there, degens every day, and they're like, Ray, what's going on with crypto? And I let them know, hey, this is what's going on with the market. I give a market update every single day of the week.
Repeat where they can find you again.
They can find me on Substack. I write articles on Substack in regards to the 4-year cycle. I have a whole strategy. It's called the crocodile strategy. And it's a method where you behave like a crocodile. You lay low, wait for predator to come close, and you snap that and you strike and get it in. And that's the strategy I apply to Bitcoin. And you can find me at realrose/substack.com for those articles where I break down all the buy zones. The buy zones between 58,000 to 18,000. That's where you want to accumulate. You can also find me on WhatsApp, and I would have to give out a number they can join for that. If members are interested, you can reach out to Dr. Rose and we can add you to our WhatsApp group, and as well as my YouTube channel. And I'm about to launch that in the next week or two, where I'm going to be breaking down crypto and macroeconomics of the market. And you'll find that at realrose/youtube.com.
So, folks, you hear it for yourself. It's a way of getting in, make some money, and live happily ever after. Thank you very much, Rial. We have come to the end of tonight's program. I hope you have learned a lot, our viewers. And thanks to Devin Bissoon and Ryan Gobin, our two technical directors, and Mr. Noir Singh for making this program available. As I said to you, we span the globe, and all our viewers and all our listeners all the way down in Australia do correspond with us from time to time. So please keep tuning to Globespan every Wednesday. And there you'll have some very, very valued information. I'm on the second and the fourth Wednesday in every month, and Mr. Noir Singh is on the first and the third Wednesday in every month. So tune into Globespan every week, every Wednesday, to learn something new, where either it's politics, economics, mental health issues. We discuss it all here on Globespan Television. And again, as I said, thanks to you, Rial, for being here tonight. And thanks to all of you. Good night, everyone.
Thank you for having me.